Okay, so one of the big questions I've been getting lately is what's going on with this whole real estate commissions stupidity? And honestly, it's exactly what it is. And to try to break this down for everybody, over the years, real estate agents have been charging a commission. And normally, when you want to sell your home and you want to use a real estate agent to do this, you contact a listing agent. And a listing agent sets up with your house and says, hey, what price do you want to get out of it? What do you want to sell it for? So forth. And what they'll do is they'll tell you how much you're going to have to pay their firm. And let's get a little bit of a history here, because I think some of us misunderstand what really happened with MLS because we only deal with the last 5 minutes of life rather than where things came from. MLS is a big deal because it houses all of the data for the actual marketing of homes that are listed through realtors in a normal market. Now, please understand, I know there are some homes that don't sell on MLS. I know there's some people that buy and sell homes off market. And again, I'm not saying that that doesn't occur. But the overwhelming majority of homes that are being bought and sold by the average person are gone through a realtor. Now, back in the 70s and 80s, you didn't have the internet so that you could go on there and go to Zillow and find homes on your own. Okay. The only way to do this was going through an MLS service. And each MLS service was a housing of data to try to help local markets be able to understand what homes are listed, what they've sold for, and have data in a very central location. Now, in order for that to happen, what you're actually paying for is not a listing agent. Okay, you're paying their brokerage firm a fee. So let's just say you're paying a 6% fee and you have a $300,000 house, you're looking at $18,000 commission. Not all that commission is going to an agent. It's going to the brokerage house because the brokerage house has assistants. It's got phones. It's got internet. It has water, electric. All those things have to be paid for by the business. So what you're paying for is not just the listing agent. You're paying for all of that. Okay. So I think we get focused too much on the fact that how much we're paying a specific real estate agent on these deals, rather than you're really not just paying the agent, you're paying the firm. And the firm might get 6%, but the agent they're going to get a portion of the money that's paid to the brokerage firm. Okay. Now, generally speaking, in the past, when the homes in the 70s and 80s, homes weren't valued at $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. In fact, homes back then were very hard to sell because there were very few people who had the money to buy those homes. So it was difficult, and when you charged a bigger amount, it took more to sell those homes. There was more marketing, there was more time and effort to try to find people who had that kind of money to buy the homes. When the average home's $50,000 and you're charging 6%, you're making $3,000. And again, let's just say there's two, because what we've really been talking about here is that you have a listing agent and a buyer agent. And they basically split the fee. And I'm just going to generically say they're going to cut it down in half. So one brokerage firm gets 3%, another brokerage firm gets 3% because one of them is listing it and one of them is selling it. And again, I know we're kind of pushing some things together, but this is the general gist of what things have been done. So again, let's just say you've got this brokerage house that listed it, and it's a $50,000 home. They made 6%, so they made $3,000. One brokerage house gets $1,500, the other brokerage house gets $1,500. Again, part of that brokerage house is they have to keep the lights on. They got to pay for water. They got to pay for internet. They got to pay MLS dues. They got all the stuff that's coming out of that fee. And the listing agent gets a portion of that $1,500. The buyer's agent, same thing. They get a portion of that $1,500. Somehow, all of you TikTokers out there seem to believe that the listing agent gets all $1,500 and the selling agent gets all $1,500. This is not how this works. And again, I'm not trying to defend anybody, okay? Although I do know some really good real estate agents that add a lot of value. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm trying to give a little bit of history and how this has kind of come to be. Where I think the misconception or the problems have actually happened is that as homes continue to increase in value and the percentages are staying the same, and they all say that they've been negotiable. I don't know if you've ever tried to negotiate with a listing agent. It doesn't go very well. I mean, you might be able to get from 7 down to 6, and there's some markets where your homes are really, really high, where the prices, or the percentages have come down simply because you're selling a $10 million home, and they're still, they're going to charge you 3 or 4% and only make $300,000 or $400,000 to sell that house. But again, what I'm trying to focus on is the average person, because that's really where this NAR things come down. And again, it really was never negotiable. And they say that, but it really wasn't. But when you look at the prices of homes as they've continued to go up, what used to be hard to sell, say a $300,000 or $400,000 house, isn't hard to sell anymore. And the difference between selling a $400,000 house and a $600,000 house really isn't that much different. Is it really worth, again, on a $400,000 house, you're getting your 6% commission, so you're paying 24 grand. Now, again, this is for the whole deal, okay? But on a $600,000 house, you're paying $36,000. Is it really $12,000 more to sell a $600,000 house than $400,000? I don't think that it is. And I think that's where this whole mess up has really happened, in my opinion. And I think that's where the Realtors Association and some of these, they haven't changed with the times. And I think that's going to have to modify. And what they've done, just what I'm going to tell you, I don't think what they've done here is going to fix the problem. So, and again, imagine you're in an area, high traffic, high volume area, and let's say Phoenix, for instance. You have somebody that buys a house for 200 grand one year. They get transferred and they need to move 2 years later. All they want to do is get the 200 grand out of it. Well, they got to sell the house for 212 just to get their $200,000 back. Somebody buys it for 212, they got to move 2 years later, it goes up. So anybody that's thinking that this 6% hasn't added to the increase and is being stupid. I understand there's inflation, I get that, but the 6% perpetually is becoming a problem. But again, I want to focus more on the history of this at the moment. So from the history, if you're at $50,000, you're charging $3 grand, okay, you're okay. And even in today's market, if you're charging $3,000 to sell a $5,000 home that, again, your company gets $1,500, the other company gets $1,500, I'm not hurting on that. Where I have the problem is that on a $600,000 house that all the listing agents really did, and I know they're going to complain about this, that all they really did was put it on MLS, they're charging $36,000. I don't know that there's enough value there. Now, let's back up and see what the agents are supposed to do in this process. And generally you have two. You have the listing brokerage firm, not just the agent, and you have the buyer's agent's firm in there. And they both have two different things. But let me ask you a question. When was the last time you actually had a listing agent come out and measure your home? Now, those of you see my other videos and stuff, you'll know that I'm actually a certified residential appraiser in addition to being a financial advisor. And I do that so I can keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the real estate market, because I've never seen a downturn and a true recession without the real estate market rolling over and unemployment going up. So I try to do appraisals for that. But let me just tell you what happens to me. And the reason I have a problem with this. Over the weekend, I did a couple of appraisals, and I was doing some research and just checking out the comparable properties that I was going to have to compare the home I was doing. So I've got somebody that's selling a house. I appraised the home, went out, measured it, and I found other homes. Now, in my area, we have two MLS systems. One is called Greenville MLS, one is called Spartanburg MLS. And I mainly do Spartanburg County, but there's an overlap there. So a lot of listing agents will list a home in both MLS systems so that they get traffic from both areas. Don't blame them, not a problem. What I find interesting is that over 50% of the homes that were listed on both MLS systems had different data. Now, why is that an issue? Again, part of what you're paying for is the professionalism of a listing agent who can list your home. Which again, first of all, I'm not saying that the square footage or the data is wrong. I'm saying that they literally cannot put the same data on two different systems the exact same way. So as an example, I had one home that was listed on there on the Greenville MLS as being 1,600 square feet, and one on the Spartanburg MLS, same house, same listing agent, same everything, as only 1,500 square feet. Well, which is it? Same situation. I have over 50% of the homes listed do not even list the actual year built of the home. Okay, so now I'm looking at this going, okay, well, what are some of the important parts that a listing agent should be doing? Because if they're trying to sell a property and market a property, shouldn't it be important to have the acreage, the square footage of the home, and the year built? Shouldn't those be pretty big things? And again, over 50% of all of these homes that I found didn't list the acreage, they didn't list the square footage, and they didn't list the year built. Now, all of this is available on our county records here. Now, I understand there's some areas that don't have the county records on there. My area does have it. And it's pretty accurate. And if you don't have it on the actual county records, our MLS system has a GIS system that you can actually, type in the house and it'll show you really close to what the acreage is. And again, I'm not necessarily saying that it has to be completely accurate. I'm saying they didn't even attempt it. So again, what am I paying for on a listing agent if they don't measure my house, if they can't come up with a square footage, an acreage, or the year built of my home to market my house? What are we actually paying for here? So again, I think this is part of what this whole thing has gotten mixed up. What are we actually paying for? Because I think a lot of us are very frustrated that we're paying real estate agents to sell our home, and yet we don't know exactly what we're getting out of it. Because again, back in the 70s and 80s, when MLS was really starting out, we didn't have all this data. We couldn't look all this stuff up. Now we have the ability to look it up. We don't necessarily need a listing agent to come in and show us what's on the market. Now, I do think what they should be doing, and I don't know if listing agents do this, is actually showing people what homes are actually selling for, not what they're listed for, because there's a big difference in what things actually sell for and listing for. And I know recently, things have been selling for what they're listing for. I get that, but that is a very recent trend. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to continue. But again, history lesson, we're trying to figure out what's going on here and what our concerns are. So as a listing agent, they're supposed to market your home. And again, half of these homes that I'm looking at on MLS, there's no data on there to market. So I don't know what they're marketing. So as much as people are upset about the buyer's agent, I'm upset about the listing agent going, what are they doing? Now, so what's happened here with the Association of Realtors, what they've lost here is that their concern is that the buyers have to pay the fee if they want a buyer's agent rather than just a listing agent. And everybody seems to think this is going to lower commissions. Now, again, let's back up to see what normally happens. So you've got a listing agent coming out to your house, and they sit down with you, and they say, okay, you want to sell your house for $300,000. You want to net $300,000. Now, there's a difference, because when you're selling a home, and this is what a listing agent should be explaining to you, that, hey, if you want 300 grand out of your house, you're going to have to pay me, the listing agent. You're going to have to pay the buyer's agent. You're going to have to pay closing costs, seller fees. There's a whole bunch that goes into that. So let's assume that in your area, it's going to cost you $5,000 roughly in closing costs to sell the house, because you've got your tax escrows and other things. And then you've got your realtor fee. Again, we're at $300,000. So you're going to have to go in there and go, okay, so I want net $300,000. You got to add $5,000 on there for closing costs. And then you've got a 6% realtor fee that you got to cover. So you're going to be in around, let's say $330,000-ish. And let me pull this up here for us so we can kind of run these numbers a little bit better. So if we're at 330,000 times 0.94, so we're at 310. You take off $5,000 for your closing costs, so you're at 305. So if you listed at $330,000, you got a little bit of room to play. So hopefully you can sell for $3.25. But that's just so that you can get $300,000 out of your house. Now, what they're trying to come down here is say that, okay, going forward, you don't have to do this with your listing agent. So the conversation you're going to have with your listing agent is going to be, okay, we still have the $5,000 in costs because you've got to pay the title company, you got to pay your taxes, escrows, and all that kind of stuff. We got to deal with that. You still got the $5,000, but I'm the listing agent, so you don't have to pay the buyer's agent anymore. You don't have to list the house so much higher. So what they're trying to say they think is going to happen is this conversation you're going to have with your listing agent is going to be, okay, we got $300,000. You only need to count 3% plus your closing costs. So if you're at $310,000 times 0.97, that gets you to 300. So you need to go a little higher. So let's go to 315 times 0.97. You got your 3% minus your 5. Okay, so 315. So maybe you listed at 320 instead of 330. And what they're hoping for is that this is going to lower the listing prices and help out with the real estate inflation. I don't think that's what's going to happen, folks. I know that's what everybody's hoping for, but I don't think it's going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to have the same conversation with your listing agent, and they're going to go, okay, on my listing agreement, it's not going to have that 6% anymore. because I don't have to pay, my brokerage company does not have to pay to whoever the buyer's agent is the fee. What they're going to say is, here's my listing agreement. My listing agreement for my firm is going to be 3%, whatever that number is, negotiable. But in order for you to sell this thing, because the average person is not going to have an extra $9,000 to pay their buyer's agent, we're still going to need to include the extra $9,000, 10 grand for the buyer to be able to buy your home. Because again, on a $300,000 house, if you've got somebody who's coming in to buy that and they're putting 20% down, they're going to need $60,000 at 300 grand for their 20% down. Plus they're going to need closing costs. Plus they're going to need to have reserves to get approved for the loan. I mean, they're going to need to have $75,000 sitting there. They're not going to have an extra 10 grand for this. So what they're going to tell you is, we're still going to list the house for 330 grand. And we're going to understand that what's probably going to happen here is, instead of having the 6% in my listing agreement is going to say 3. And what you're going to do is, when the purchase agreement comes in, currently you have a lot of what are called seller paid closing costs. So what you'll see on a purchase agreement is, you'll have it listed for 300,000. They'll say, hey, listen, I need 5 grand to help with my closing costs, so I will pay $305,000. And you're going to give me 5 grand so that I can pay my real estate closing fees, my title company, the appraisal, all sorts of stuff. You don't care, because you want 300 grand and they're paying 305. You'll give them 5,000. It's not a big deal. What you're going to do now is, they're going to come in and go, okay, I need 5 grand for seller paid closing costs, but I also need 10 grand for my buyer's agent. So I'm going to pay 315,000 or 320 grand, and I need you to give me these fees. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, I think what you're going to probably see down the road is, you're going to see Fannie Mae, you're going to see Freddie Mac, you're going to see FHA and VA all come down with their own new rules and ideas on what's going on. And what they're going to do is say, okay, yes, in your purchase agreement, you can list what your closing costs are going to be, and you can differentiate them on how you want. So I don't think anything they've just done is going to affect diddly. What they should have done was focused on the 6% numbers. And I don't think that should be allowed. I don't think it should be allowed to say, hey, we're going to charge you 6% or 3% or a percentage. I think it should be more along the lines of what it is. And again, I think the problem with that is the same. Even in today's market, sometimes even selling a $50,000 house, I don't think they should get 6% of that. It's probably not enough. Because sometimes selling a $50,000 house in this market is as hard as selling a $500,000, because $50,000 homes sometimes have a lot of damage and a lot of issues that, as a really good real estate agent, you're going to understand and have to deal with. I think what we're probably going to do in aggregate is change all this stuff. But I don't think it's going to affect anybody else as far as the buyer's agent. It's just going to affect how it's done. It's just not going to be listed in the listing agreement anymore. It's going to get switched over to the purchase agreement. That's my opinion. No one has told me that's going to happen. It's just the only way it can happen, because these buyers, especially the new buyers that have, they're putting 5% down or 3% down or no money down, they're not going to have the money to pay the buyer's agent. And the buyer's agents are going to want to get paid. Now, again, I'm not beating up any realtors in this process. That's not my point. Like I say, I've got several realtors that I love, that are great, that really know what they're doing. And I do know there's a bunch of realtors out there that haven't got a clue. And again, I'm not beating up anybody, but if you're one of those listing agents that doesn't even have the ability to list the actual square footage and acreage and year built of a home on MLS, how are you charging anybody anything? Those are the kind of things I think we need to look into. And I think realtors need to really focus on is what are you actually bringing to the table? What are you actually helping people with? That should be the focus. Because I'm a appraiser, I have access to MLS. And I actually can list a home on MLS. But I've even had that conversation I've had a relatively expensive home I was trying to sell at one point, and I'd had a couple of realtors that couldn't sell it. Now, this was during 2010, 2011, when the market wasn't so great. And I literally asked one of them, I'm like, what are you going to do to market my home different than the other guy? They didn't have an answer. So here's my thing to your realtors out there that want to get your fee and you don't think that you're overpaid. You need to start explaining what you actually do. And what we, as the average person, need to be able to see is what that actually correlates to us and how you're actually making us more money. Because they normally will tell you that if you try to sell your house without a realtor, you're going to make less money. You have to show that to me. Because at this point, I'm not seeing it. Because if you can't list the acreage, the year built, I don't know what you're doing for me. Again, what are you marketing? Because those are the important things. In addition to the home being renovated and updated, I get that. But, the home that's 1,500 square feet is not worth the same as a 2,000 or 2,500 square foot home. And if you can't literally put that on there, what are you doing? And a home that's built in 1950 versus a home built in 2005, generally speaking, they should be a higher quality home. I know there's tract homes and so forth, but I'm just saying typically a custom built home from the 50s is not going to be as custom built as one from the 2005 time frame. What I want to focus on here, folks, is that this is not going to do what they wanted it to do. And if anything, I think it's going to cost more money. And the reason I say that is the government got involved. And 9 out of 10, when the government gets involved, things don't cost less for us. They end up costing more. Just my 2 cents worth. That's what I think is going to happen. Dickie out.